Johnny McGonigal, Max Ralph. We're both rocking hats with a little bit of Masters green in it, wishing we were at the start of Masters season of golf, major season, Max. But you know what? If that were the case, we'd still be in April
That's
and
right.
we'd still be going through spring camp and we wouldn't be a little more than a week away from the college football season. I mean, really, we got Kansas State, Iowa State, and Dublin this weekend, week
I
0.
know.
College football is here, man, and so I wouldn't trade that for anything. Very excited to talk to you today on our live podcast, as we do every Thursday at noon on the Blue White Breakdown by Penn Live. The chat is open right now. If you come in late, if you're in there now, drop your questions, your comments. We're going to be breaking down Penn State's schedule in full today. PennLive's, our staff predictions went out this morning on the website. You, me, Bob Flounders, Joe Hermit. We all see a really, really good season for Penn State, as many others do. But, there's some differentiations in the schedule in terms of the picking the games. Not so much with us, Max, but
Mhm.
I know Bob had threw a little interesting
He
wrinkle in
did.
there that
He did.
we'll discuss. We'll discuss that. But first and foremost, man, how are you?
I'm good, Johnny. I everything you said. We're 9 days away from the season opener in Happy Valley. I just keep saying it, but it's truth, and it comes to my mind every time we do this. Just ready to see some football in the field. It's been a long off season. The hype of Penn State's returning core of the expectations this year meant we had a lot of hypothetical discussions this offseason through this summer. So I'm just ready to see the ball put on the field, hear the pop of some pads. This is the golden season of sports for me. I am not an NBA fan, not really an NHL fan, so winter sports kind of whatever. But we get playoff races in baseball. We get the opening of college football in the NFL. I'm living. Obviously, Masters season is great, like you said, Johnny. Plus, my birthday's in April, but this is the golden age, and the weather is starting to feel a little more like fall, but still summer temperatures. Like this is prime. This is prime.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about golf. I mean, we were just talking the other day about maybe sneaking it
Yeah,
around before the Oregon game,
yeah.
which you gotta love a September whiteout. I know a lot of fans who are going to be going to the game
Yeah.
against Oregon on September 27th are very excited for that. Should be good weather,
Mhm.
and of course a night out, a whiteout night game, massive opponent, massive game. But Max, before Penn State gets to Oregon, they've got a few more games on the schedule.
They do.
Some would call them preseason games.
It's fair
In
perspective.
the biz, you call them a buy game, where you buy you like not like a buy like an idle week, even though
Yep.
it essentially is a buy game. Literally, you're paying for a team to come in and play you. They open the season next Saturday against Nevada, and then
Mhm.
following that, FIU and Villanova.
Yep.
Uh, you know, in terms of checking off wins there, that was pretty easy when it came to our game by game season predictions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at last season, and obviously Penn State had a pretty legitimate scare against Bowling Green, but none of those three teams are Bowling Green. Like they had a solid coaching staff last year. They had a veteran quarterback. In the MAC, like genuinely, MAC teams are capable of surprises here and there, especially FIU and Villanova. I mean, Villanova is an FCS team. FIU and Nevada specifically have been ravaged by the transfer portal. They had some good players from last year's teams, and they're just not there anymore. It's kind of how today's college football goes. And so, when you look at these three games, obviously anything can happen. James Franklin will say it every week. Don't want to overlook this opponent, because when you lose a game in week 2, how's it going to reflect on you when the college football playoff selection committee gets going? He's right. You got to win these games, but there really should not be any issues. And I think you and I, and all four of us, Bob Flounders and Joe Hermit included, very much on the same page that these should be a cakewalk.
All right, so let's just jump right to Oregon then.
Yeah.
Let's bypass the first 3 weeks. There's going to be a good opportunity for freshmen, for younger players, for the 2 deep and 3 deep guys, the backups and reserves, to get some good work those first 3 weeks. If you missed last Thursday's episode, Max and I talked a lot about those freshmen who were impressing
Mm-hmm.
in fall camp. Some of those younger players who might step up. Chaz Coleman was a big topic of conversation. So if you missed that episode, when we're done with this, go back and give that a listen.
Yeah.
But let's get to Oregon, Max,
Yeah.
and the whiteout, 7:30, NBC, prime time, hopefully good weather. It's setting up to be a spectacle, right? This is a game that Penn State fans and we too, like, covering the sport, covering this team, like you get, a little bit more juice for bigger games. Penn State's been missing that
Mm-hmm.
recently. Think about it. The whiteout last year being Washington, you had Iowa in there, Minnesota in there in recent years, with Big Noon Kickoff taking, the big home games. And the way that it broke this year, thank you for Ohio State and Texas, scheduling a non-conference game that Fox wanted.
Yep.
This game fell in the lap of NBC, and it's a night game. And I think it's Penn State's pretty clearly it's the second hardest game of the season, second toughest opponent behind those pesky Buckeyes, the reigning national champs. But you got a dub for the Nittany Lions here in week 4, Max, or week 5?
In fact, I do. This game is everything you want in college football. It's two big conference contenders early in the season, exciting before you really know everything about these teams. Said it a few times, but Oregon gets Northwestern and Oregon State going up to this game, so may have to show a little more than what Penn State will against those three teams they get the run up to. But look, this is a Big Ten championship game rematch from last season. Penn State, both teams played pretty well in that game. I mean, it was close. Penn State kind of sluggish off to the start. Defense did not play well, but the offense really fought and came back. It was an exciting championship game in Indianapolis. It's time for revenge, and Oregon's team looks completely different. I have a W here. Oregon brought in a great offensive line haul in the transfer portal. Like that group up front is going to look good again this year. And that also includes Mekhi Hughes, the running back from Tulane, who comes in, really freaking good player. They should be able to run the ball this year. My biggest question, look, is the defense there? Is the front seven led by Mateo Uyunglele still? Is it going to be good? The secondary should be pretty good. A couple of big name transfers there too. It's up to the quarterback. Can the quarterback replicate what Dillon Gabriel did last year? Especially coming in early season, playing in a whiteout, a night game. The environment is going to be off the charts. I like Penn State's advantage in this one. Veteran quarterback in a primetime game like that makes a huge difference. I think Penn State has what it takes to beat Oregon this year.
Yeah, I've also got Penn State winning this game for all the reasons you said already, Max, and just to expound upon them. Oregon lost 10 guys to the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. So while this is a Big Ten championship rematch, it's a very different team. Obviously, no Dillon Gabriel, but also you look up and down the trenches. Tez Johnson, the star wide receiver, Terrace Ferguson, really good tight end, no longer there. They've got another one in the pipeline. And you mentioned Mekhi Hughes coming over from Tulane at running back. You mentioned the offensive line additions that Dan Lanning made in the portal. Isaiah World from Nevada, actually, Emmanuel Pregnon from USC. Like those guys are expected to be very good. And, arguably the best portal haul, maybe them and Texas Tech this offseason across college football. And that Dan Lanning is going to have, in terms of the environment and the atmosphere, I don't think there might not be a better coach in college football that is able to kind of bottle up an emotion and just get their team ready to play. Like we've all seen, the midweek or pregame halftime videos of Dan Lanning and his, the way he's able to rally a group. But I do think that it comes down to Dante Moore, the former 5-star quarterback. He'll be making his 4th start for Oregon. You mentioned, maybe 5th start. You mentioned Northwestern in there, Oregon State, which is obviously, a rivalry game, a long-standing rivalry game. They also play Oklahoma State early in the year, which Oklahoma State has not. They were not good at all last year. But still, like they've got some power conference opponents. Maybe that's a good thing for Oregon, that they're able to play some higher level teams early, relatively speaking. maybe by then there's questions over Dante Moore, and then he's entering, a whiteout, kind of on shaky ground. So
Mhm.
I'll take Penn State in this environment, this team, against an Oregon team that might still be figuring things out by then.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Look, I think the other important thing is while it's a different situation, Oregon has a couple of power conference teams in the lead up. Penn State had some question marks with, obviously wide receiver, defensive end, linebacker, positions where transfers or young players are going to need to be playing at their best to beat a team like Oregon. And that run up with those three low level non conference teams gives us a chance, and Penn State a chance, to see what they really have with those guys. My mind especially goes to defensive end, where we expect Chaz Coleman, Ivan Kamaju, a couple of freshmen to get on there, get on the big stage, and have to go after the passer inside of Beaver Stadium. So I think it's a really big deal. I think a lot of the chips are falling in Penn State's favor in this game against Oregon. Johnny, before we move on, really quickly, Michael Kilcoyne, David Flannery, thank you guys for the comments. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will get to questions after we get through the schedule. I want to make sure that we roll through the schedule first, and then we'll get to any questions that anybody has.
One other note, Max, just on the environment that I think we're going to have at Beaver Stadium in that whiteout. You look at the ticket prices, like Penn State fans know, in terms of the third market and everything.
Yep.
Penn State fans know that this is the game, really. I mean, obviously you have Indiana later in the season as well, not to be overlooked. We'll talk about the Hoosiers in a second. But these fans are going to be riled up. And I just think of the environment that was created during the CFP first round. I mean, really every whiteout, but you think about that CFP first round game, the way that Kevin Jennings was kind of unable to handle the pressure and unable to handle the noise. Really intrigued to see how Dante Moore, as a first-year starter, is able to handle that environment.
Yeah, most definitely. Johnny, let's move on to the next game on the schedule. Continuing in Big Ten play, this is one of my, as a little teaser, coming out Friday morning, I have biggest trap games of the year coming out for Penn State. Actually, that might be Saturday morning. I've got it messed up in my head. It's scheduled. You'll find it eventually. But this is one of my biggest trap games of the year, Johnny. And I have a few reasons why, but I'll let you talk about it first. It's a West Coast trip immediately the week after Oregon out to UCLA, who, now the Fighting Nico Iamaleava is out there. The Bruins, interesting transfer portal haul, but not a very good team last season. Curious to hear your thoughts on them.
Yeah, I think before I get into Nico, I'll say this about Deshaun Foster's team. I thought they really fought last year, especially down the stretch. Like, the initial impression he had at last summer's Big Ten Media Days was not very good at all. And it was like just getting off on the wrong foot, basically, saying, hey, we're here in LA. Yes, we know. But I do think that by the end of the season, UCLA was not the butt of jokes. Like I thought that they played really hard for him, and I think that defense will be decent. It's really going to come down to Nico Iamaleava, and I mean, you talk about it being a trap game. I understand that. I will say, I think in terms of just the stage, it could be one of the more high-profile games that Penn State plays. Think about it, like they're going to be playing in the Rose Bowl, and this is going to be billed as a matchup between Drew Aller and Nico Iamaleava, two quarterbacks who guided their teams to the CFP last year. Nico with Tennessee, and obviously Drew with Penn State. And the NFL scouts are going to be out for that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. The reason that I deem it a trap game for Penn State is because when you look at the schedule, UCLA is not jumping off the page as one of the toughest games of the year. It's pretty obviously Oregon, Ohio State, Iowa on the road, and even Indiana at home as well after last year's CFP run. But look, playing in a Big Ten championship game rematch against Oregon in the whiteout, I'm picking Penn State to win. You come off of the high of a game like that where the emotion really doesn't get any bigger than what that's going to be. I mean, obviously, if Ohio State was the whiteout, maybe it's a little different. But you come off of a game like that, you got to travel all the way to the West Coast the very next week. I know James Franklin and a lot of college football coaches will argue and scold me for even mentioning it as an impact in any way. But come on, it's a long trip. I think that obviously players should be able to handle it, but it is a thing that's happening. And look, UCLA's got an interesting squad. They absolutely fought in games last year, but nothing jumped off the page from them. The receiving core is very questionable alongside Nico. I think that they've got a couple of good under-the-radar running backs, and the defense was, average last year. So interesting team, not necessarily anticipating them to be like a Big Ten contender this year, but with all of the factors of coming off of that Oregon game, I think it's a trap game. I think it's a game that fans will generally overlook, and it's one where, any little thing can go wrong, and Penn State could end up with a skid mark on the record. But that said, I do think it's a win. I've got Penn State winning that game.
Yeah, so do I. Although I will say, I'll just add on that. Earlier this week, I published my 5 Big Ten sleepers.
Yeah,
I left out the teams that were ranked inside the top 25. Obviously,
yeah.
Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana, UCLA. And so then obviously your field to pick from is pretty slim if you're picking 5 teams, but
yeah,
UCLA was one of those just because of the Nico factor and Sean Foster in year 2. I think could be just an interesting team to watch.
Yeah. Next game, Johnny, Northwestern at home. This one is, I'm going to guess, not one that landed on your sleepers list.
No, not at all. No. I think Northwestern is going to be pretty bad again. And if this was at Northwestern, which, by the way, Oregon plays at Northwestern and it's already scheduled for noon. Like the noon game at Northwestern is always that drowsy, dreary, sleepy game that can sometimes, if not like big teams lose that game, it's at least more interesting than it absolutely should be.
Yep. It's happened to Penn State before.
It happened to Ohio State in the past. Penn State gets Northwestern at home. This is going to be very easy. I think very easy.
No, I'm with you. I think it's a win. Don't think we have to talk too in depth about it. What I will say, the last time Northwestern came to Beaver Stadium, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both fumbled in a rainy, disgusting game that I want to say the final score was like 17-13. Is that what it was? It was
something nasty. Yeah.
It was an ugly game that was not Penn State's best effort. Weird things happen, but that's homecoming. It's the stripe out. It should be a fun one. I don't see much there. I think Penn State
7, by the way, 17-7.
Okay, 17-7.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's the stripe out. It is. It should not be much of a question. I think Penn State beats Northwestern handedly, which brings us to one of the top 3 or 4 toughest games on Penn State's schedule. A trip to Kinnick Stadium to play Iowa and a team that might have a quarterback, Johnny.
Yeah. Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State. He won 2 FCS national titles there. Dual threat guy. I mean, he could arguably be. He could go down in terms of like this season, in terms of the hype and everything around him. And I think the ability, because being the sicko as I am, I actually watched some South Dakota State last year.
I believe you. Yep.
And he could go down as Kirk Ferentz's best quarterback, which on one hand is not saying much because Iowa is not known, for their sterling offensive play by no means, but he is a very talented guy. And you look at the situation that Penn State will be going into at Iowa. James Franklin has coached in 3 games at Iowa. Yeah. Those games have been decided by a combined 11 points. And we all think back to the walk-off, Trace McSorley to Juwan Johnson.
Yeah.
In that game that Saquon absolutely went off and hurdled damn near every Iowa defender. But, all these games have been close that James Franklin has played in. And some fans, the more pessimistic fans, might think back to the top 5 matchup that they lost because Sean Clifford went out injured and Tyler Robertson came in, and we all know how that went. It's a raucous environment, Kinnick Stadium. It's one of my favorite stadiums just to go to in the Big Ten in terms of a juiced environment. And Iowa could have a sneaky, Iowa last year, they lost a lot of 1-score games and they ended up finishing, I believe it was 8-5. I mean, if you're able to split the 1-score games that they had, they could have been a 10-win team last year. And then you drop in a quarterback as in a vacuum talented as Gronowski is. This is a team. I picked Penn State to win, but this is a team that I would not be surprised if at the end of the regular season is 10-2.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Think Iowa should have a good team. You just look, Kirk Ferentz has been doing this for as long as he's been doing this for a lot of reasons. He's a good football coach. He is a consistent football coach. His product always looks eerily similar to the year before. They're going to play dang good defense. And the question is just whether the offense can really step up. And I think the quarterback, Gronowski, is a big difference maker for them. And look, I was there at Kinnick Stadium for the top 5 matchup. I believe you were as well, Johnny, or that was the year before you came back to the beat.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I was there. It was loud and it was crazy. It was probably my favorite game that I've covered while on the Penn State beat. It was just an incredible environment. They stormed the field. I don't think a lot of people who like a lot of casual college football fans, a lot of casual Big Ten fans realize just how good of an environment Iowa puts on over there. The stadium's not massive. It holds just under 70,000, I think. But the sidelines come in. The fans are right on top of players. The heckling is out of this world. It's a great environment.
The booing is out of this world too.
Yeah.
And that's something to keep in mind with this game is we're talking about it being a potentially really tough game for Penn State, which it very well might be.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a chance that maybe Gronowski isn't up for it in the Big Ten, and this offense is still not great. And, Penn State might have an opportunity to put it on. And, James Franklin remembers everything. He remembers everything. And the booing of the injuries and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Like if there's a chance, if this isn't a close game, and if Penn State's up by 17 or 24 or something in the fourth quarter, they're going to try to get another touchdown.
Yes.
So that's another on the flip side of this being, if it's not close, another storyline going into that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I think it's a win, but I just don't want to discount just how tough of an environment that can really be. I think Iowa's going to have a good team. And look, I might eat my words at some point in this season, but while I predict this as a win for Penn State, all in all, I have Penn State going 11-1 this year. I think that this game at Iowa will be tougher than even the whiteout against Oregon. As I stand today, I feel pretty confident about Penn State beating Oregon in the whiteout. And I think this game against Iowa, all the factors with it being a road matchup in an environment that we know has proven to be really difficult, I just think that I have more concern for my prediction going awry in this game rather than I do against Oregon, which most people would say is probably projected to be a better team.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm pretty confident Penn State's going to win both of these games.
Yeah.
I'm very confident they're going to beat Oregon. And I just think the timing of it, if this game was later in the season, maybe, I would feel a little not worse about Penn State, but maybe a little bit better about Oregon. I think overall, like I had them preseason ranked number 9 in my AP ballot. And I know a lot of other teams had them higher. I think they even got a first place vote, I believe. Yeah. And so I know other voters had them higher. And I don't know. I give pause. And we talked last week. We had the question last week of which AP top 10 team in the preseason could fall out of the rankings. Yep. And by the way, I checked that stat. It's 29 of the last 32 years that has happened. Yeah. So it pretty much happens every year.
Yeah.
Oregon could be that team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right, let's keep it rolling, Johnny. We obviously can talk a lot about all of these games, but then it's the big one after Iowa. This stretch of this season, you go Iowa on the road, Ohio State on the road, Indiana at home. These 3 games really, in my opinion, and I think probably in everybody's, is the determining stretch of Penn State's season. CFP ranking, Big Ten championship hopes. It all comes down to this 3-game stretch because it's a tough one at Iowa. It's the big one on the road at Ohio State, and then it's maybe a sneaky tough one at home against Indiana. So Ohio State, Johnny, I think you and I see this one the same way as of right now. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to send it over to you first.
Yeah, my thoughts are Penn State has to do it before I pick them to win at Ohio State. It hasn't happened since 2011. I picked them to win, I believe, going back in 2023, and I felt really silly about it. Last year, I picked them to win in the regular season, and I felt kind of silly about it because it's just like it's one of those where Ohio State has it over James Franklin, and until At least in the regular season, because I'm going to throw a little curveball. I'm going to kind of go back on literally what I just said, but at least in the regular season, until Penn State proves it, I'm not going to pick them to win in the regular season against Ohio State, and particularly at the Horseshoe.
Yep,
I think it would be a storybook win
it
for
would
Drew
be.
Aller
Oh yeah.
specifically. Think about it. I know that the narrative lifted from Franklin and everything, that would be a big part of it, but think about Drew Aller from Medina, Ohio, who wasn't recruited by Ohio State until the very last minute. There was a
Mhm.
reclassification with Quinn Ewers, and by that point, it was too late. He was already committed to Penn State. He was already locked in with the Nittany Lions. He lost, at Ohio State. Not just he, obviously the whole team, but and he was emotional in
Mhm.
2023 after the game. If Penn State were to win this game, that would be kind of monkey off the back kind of deal.
Yep.
But I have Penn State losing a close one at Ohio State. I just think Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, one of those two guys, it's kind of easy to bank on them making a game changing play, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, you said exactly what I wanted to say about this. I'll believe it when I see it. I genuinely think, on paper, heading into the season, I think Penn State has a better team than Ohio State, and I'm not afraid to say that. Like, there's just more experience, there's more depth at key positions. Obviously, Ohio State has probably the two best players in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, but I think all in all, Penn State has the better team. But going to Ohio State, James Franklin has not beaten Ohio State since 2016, and it was at home. Everybody knows the story. Pound it over and over again. I will believe it when I see it. I think Penn State could win this game. I think when you talk about a guy like Jeremiah Smith, there's been that super talented, freaky number one wide receiver for a long time now. My argument would be Penn State might have that super talented, freaky cornerback to guard him this year, which, I mean, there have been good cornerbacks in the past couple of years at Penn State. Joey Porter Jr., Kalen King played well. He obviously got beat pretty hard by Marvin Harrison Jr., but AJ Harris is better than both of those guys were at this stage in their careers, in my opinion. And that matchup is going to be a lot of fun. Matchup is going to be a ton of fun. But I'm with you. I can't pick Penn State to beat Ohio State until it happens because I've done it before and it's burned me.
So going slightly back on my word a little bit, I'm still picking Penn State to lose this game, but with the caveat of I think they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game.
Okay, interesting.
I think that both of these teams get to Indianapolis, Lucas Oil Stadium, and I think that's where Drew Aller gets his monkey off the back, kind of like breathe, exhale kind of moment. And I think a part of that is Jim Knowles, him being able to then scheme up Ohio State a second time.
Yeah.
Andy Kotelnicki being able to scheme up this against this Ohio State defense a second time. And I think that's going to be really valuable, that time and that stretch and that film, if it happens this way, right? I mean, if Penn State goes and beats Ohio State in the Horseshoe, I would not be surprised at all, because I do agree with you. I think Penn State is a better team than Ohio State going into the season. That's why I ranked them number one in my preseason poll. That's why I had Ohio State at 4. But I kind of just see it working out this way, where Penn State goes 11-1, which at this point we've gotten past most of the big games. I know we're going to talk about Indiana, but I see Penn State going 11-1 in the regular season with a loss at Ohio State, and then they beat the Buckeyes in the Big Ten championship.
I have the exact same prediction. I feel the same way. Minus Big Ten championship, I didn't predict out that far. That's tough to do. I do think that Penn State will be playing in that game, but we'll see. I didn't go that far. Let's get to Indiana. Keep rolling through this because we get pretty long-winded on some of these.
I know. Well, I was going to say we're through Oregon, we're through Ohio State. At this point, we've got Indiana and Indiana. Bob. We need to give a little hat tip for Bob.
Yeah, can we give him a call right now for?
Yeah.
Come hop on the pod, Bob.
Let's phone a friend, because
yeah,
he picked Penn State to beat Ohio State, but then lose the next week at home to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to guess his reasoning, being like the ultimate high of beating Ohio State, and then you come home and you have a hangover about it, and you drop a stinker. I think this team is different than teams in years past where,
Yeah.
We both picked Penn State to lose Ohio State. And in years past, James Franklin's teams have allowed one loss to turn into two.
Yeah.
And I think this team is just different. The way that it's built with the veterans, with Drew, Nick, Katron, Denai, Zane. I mean, even, Dom DeLuca, Nick Dawkins, in terms of the leadership in the locker room. I don't see them slipping up against Indiana.
Yeah, I think to some extent, Bob just likes to be the contrarian. I think when we make our weekly game predictions too, he always tries to pick something that nobody else is going to pick. But I also do believe that there's a part of this that he thinks this is going to happen, and I understand where he's coming from. For some of the reasons you just laid out there, I wrote Indiana as a trap game this year, which I will go into that a little bit more. But just to expand on the idea that this team is different than past years, I wrote a column in the CFP run last year, just ahead of the CFP. Like, I think that James Franklin has changed in the way that he coaches his teams a little bit. And I think that has set Penn State up for continued success in an expanded college football playoff era. Because, look, his teams had a chance to roll over last year after losing to Ohio State, after losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship, and they didn't do it. I think he takes an approach with his team that is impressive and goes week to week. And the difference that I saw in James Franklin, if we dive into the Minnesota game from last season, he was more aggressive as a coach. Some of the things that he said in wake of the Ohio State loss, where he said, I planned what I wanted to say after this game. He was admitting that he thought they were going to win that game. That's not something he would ever do in the past, like 5 in the other 10 years that he's been the head coach at Penn State. He wasn't really saying those things. The great to elite speech is like that was an admission of, look, we weren't here yet. Last year, he basically said, without saying it, I thought we were good enough to win this game. I thought we were going to win this game. And
I thought I was going to come in here and say that we've gone from great to elite.
Yes, that's basically what he said. Yeah. James Franklin was not saying that the last 5 years, no matter how good he thought his team was. He understands this team. Like, he is so in control of these leaders, I think. I don't expect this team to roll over this season. I think it's, the fourth down call against the fake punt against Minnesota. He's coaching with his back against the wall right now. And I think that is a huge boost in these situations where you come off an emotional game against Ohio State for this season, like we're talking about right now. And I think it's a huge boost to their chances to continue to win and not turn one loss into two. To talk more specifically about the 2025 schedule, I'm off my soapbox a little bit. I think, Johnny, that Indiana is a trap game because, yes, Indiana made the college football playoff last year, but I think there's probably still a really good portion of college football fans, of Penn State fans, who say, that was just a fluke. They had a really easy schedule last season, and they did. They just got in because they had a good record playing in Power Conference. Look, Curt Cignetti reloaded in the portal, man, and he addressed some of the biggest issues that they had on that team. He got 2 experienced offensive linemen who started at Notre Dame and Ohio State over the past few years. He got a good running back in Roman Hemby, who used to be at Maryland. And then they've still got D'Angelo Pons and Elijah Surratt. You got a quarterback who's been talked about a ton this offseason in Fernando Mendoza. The emotions of the Ohio State game could make some teams fall into the trap against Indiana. No bye week, between those two. A hangover, win or lose. A hangover could happen for some teams. I personally don't think James Franklin does it. But the reason I called Indiana a trap game is because I think they're going to be better than people expect this year. And I think the combination of coming off of that Ohio State game could trip some teams up. I picked Penn State to win this game, but I think there's a lot going into this one that makes it one of the more intriguing games on the schedule this year.
Yeah, definitely. I also, like I said, I have Penn State winning this game, but for all the reasons you outlined, I agree with you. Indiana is a very interesting team in year 2 under Curt Cignetti. Mm-hmm. A couple of notes. One, I've talked about this before too, like in terms of kind of hitching your wagon to the portal and your success to the portal. We saw it really work out for Florida State a couple of years ago when they went undefeated. And then last year they were a total,
dumpster fire,
a total dumpster fire, a total, I don't see that happening to Indiana, but I do look at their schedule and say, they play Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon in a 3-game stretch, and 2 of those games at Iowa, at Oregon on the road, they could be at least a 3-loss team coming to Beaver Stadium.
Yeah.
And at that point, they would need to win and win out to be 9-3 and be in consideration for the 12-team playoff. So, I had Indiana, I think, ranked number 17 in my preseason poll. And I think it's a fair place to put them, given the past success, given the head coach and everything that he's been able to accomplish there already. But just really intrigued to see what this Indiana team looks like by the time they play Penn State. It does help. You mentioned Surratt, Pons, Mikael Kamara is one of the best edge rushers in the Big Ten and in the country. But I do think Penn State will win this game. And I think it's because they're more talented. And I think that it's because they have just that mindset. Whatever happens at Ohio State, like if they go and win at Ohio State, I'm still picking Penn State to win this Indiana game, regardless.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a win. I think Penn State's a better team. I think, playing at home, I'm just presenting for devil's advocacy. Yeah, this game is a trap game in a lot of ways.
I see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. Michigan State wrapping up the season here. Johnny, you and I both have wins there. That one is just, look, the Spartans they had a bad year last year. I don't know. I'm not impressed.
Just one quick point on Michigan State. I thought Aiden Childs was going to be one of the low-key better quarterbacks in the Big Ten last year. He was not, but he does have a lot of skill. I remember him coming in, getting kind of subbed in as a backup, a couple series here and there at Oregon State a couple years ago when Jonathan Smith, now Michigan State's head coach, was with the Beavers. And his arm is ridiculous. He can run. He can be an electric and fun quarterback. It's just a matter of if he puts it all together. But I see a pretty easy Penn State win here.
Yep. Let's move on. Nebraska, one of my third of 3 trap games this year for Penn State. I think it's a win. I'm predicting a win. You get them at home. First time Matt Rule will be there since he was in town with Temple a long time ago. A lot of fans at times have said, we want Matt Rule instead of James Franklin. We've heard that narrative a few times. But look, it's an intriguing one. Nebraska didn't end with a great record last year, had some pretty big disappointments down the stretch. But they were ranked for two weeks in 2024, and they bring back some talent. And I think they brought in one of the most underrated transfer portal hauls in the country this year. I feel like when you talk about transfer portals from this offseason, you get the Oregon, you get the Texas A&M a lot, but haven't heard quite as much about Nebraska. There's a really good haul there. And Johnny, I think for that reason, I think this is the last trap game for Penn State because Nebraska hasn't been good for a while. But I think they could have a solid team this year.
Yeah, a lot hinges on Dylan Raiola at quarterback, the former 5-star who, models his pregame and celebrations off of Patrick Mahomes. He's got to play like Mahomes, not in the Super Bowl, but just generally speaking, play like Patrick Mahomes this year in order for Nebraska to take a second step. You mentioned the transfer portal additions, Dane Key, wide receiver from Kentucky, who, I believe Georgia was really after, and then he ends up at Nebraska. That's a big addition. I'm also intrigued by 2 things when it comes to Matt Rule. One, the pregame handshake or hug with Pat Kraft. Director Pat Kraft, because those 2 are very close. Kraft was the athletic director at Temple when Rule was the head coach. They are friends. The other thing with Matt Rule, though, actually more pertinent to the actual game, is we've seen in the past when Matt Rule turns around a program, it happens in year 3. We saw it at Temple. They won 10 games. We saw it at Baylor. They won 11 games. Now he's in year 3 at Nebraska, and it's not now or never for him, but it is one of those things that I think Nebraska fans are excited by, and Big Ten fans or people who cover the Big Ten are intrigued by. Will it happen in year 3 for Matt Rule at Nebraska with, again, Dylan Raiola, a former 5-star quarterback who played like a freshman last year. He made some really good plays and then made some really boneheaded decisions as well. He's able to, actually hone in on his ability and make good on it and live up to the hype. Then Nebraska could be a fun little team.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You mentioned Dane Key. He was a good player who had a lot of suitors in the portal. They also brought in Nazia Hunter from Cal, who's another good wide receiver to help out there. And they're I guess not their top running back by yardage, but top running back by yards per carry. Emmett Johnson is back this year. The things that make me most intrigued about Nebraska this season is, of course, Dylan Raiola, if he takes the next step. But the offensive line was not particularly good. Raiola was on the run a lot last year. They were bottom half of the country in sacks per game. They brought in Rocco Spindler from Notre Dame, who had 23 starts over the past 2 seasons. Guy was a stalwart on what was a good offensive line at Notre Dame. And Elijah Pritchett from Alabama on the outside, who was a 5-star, top 5 tackle in the country, and made 12 starts last season. Those are big-time additions up front, will help Raiola and also help get the run game going that was pretty mediocre last season. And it extends to the trenches on the defensive side. They lost a young player who looked pretty promising in Prince Will Uman Mielen. Brother was just drafted in, the first round this year of the NFL? Second round, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But good player, good bloodline. They lost him to the portal. They lost 2 of their top linebackers, but they brought back 4 of their top 5 defensive backs. And they brought in Dasan McCullough, who wasn't as productive last year, but has been a productive player off the edge in the past. And Williams Winery, who was the top defensive line recruit in the 2024 class and didn't play a whole lot last year. They reloaded in the trenches. I think it's an intriguing game that, you think of tough teams on the schedule. Nebraska isn't necessarily the first team that comes to mind. But I really think when you dive into what the team did this offseason, could be a tough one.
Yeah, interesting team, and especially when you just look at, relatively speaking, throughout the schedule, one of the harder games. They were included in my 5 toughest games of the year, at least in the regular season. And I don't think the last game of the schedule will be all that tough, Max.
Nope.
At Rutgers, Thanksgiving weekend. This feels like a get in, get out win for Penn State, like a 28-6. Just do what you need to do.
Yep.
If you're 10-1 at that point in the season, and possibly in position to be in the Big Ten title game, make the CFP. You've got a lot ahead of you. Obviously, you're not going to overlook Rutgers. They're not going to lose this game, but this feels like just go in, run the ball, throw a couple touchdowns, and get out of there.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Look, give James Franklin and his teams credit. They have not struggled with these end-of-season type games over the past couple of years in the way that some teams could. They actually tend to dismantle these types of opponents. Just look at the Maryland game last year. Going out to Rutgers is a slog, as you mentioned, like it is going to Northwestern at noon. It's just not ever a fun trip to Piscataway. But Penn State, I think Rutgers has scored, a total of 6 points against Penn State in the past 2 seasons. This one is pretty cut and dry. It's a win. I think Penn State finishes 11-1. You think Penn State finishes 11-1. Joe Hermit was alongside us with the only loss to Ohio State. Bob Flounders, however, 11-1, but win at Ohio State, lost to Indiana. That's how we see this thing going this regular season over here at Penn Live.
We do. We got some questions to get to, Max.
Yeah. We got one that I want to hit first. Michael Kilcoyne early in the show. Want to make sure we get to you. Longtime listener, first-time commenter. Thank you. Hope you do it again. Will Nick and Katron both go over 1,250 yards this season with an even better OL and better wide receivers that could take guys out of the box? I'll turn it to you first.
1,250. That's very specific. Man, it's interesting because on one hand, you would think yes, especially, both guys went over 1,000 yards last year. I think Penn State is going to make it really far.
Yeah.
Like really far. I'm going to have my college football playoff predictions, which will then be, my projections will be week by week in terms of which teams are getting in. But I've got preseason predictions on the CFP coming on Monday. Mm-hmm. I've got Penn State going very far. Yeah. So I think they're going to be playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
And I already said they're going to win the Big Ten against Ohio State. So, you're probably looking at 16 games.
Yeah.
And over a 16-game season, Nick and Katron should get over 1,000 yards again.
Yeah.
The only reason why, and possibly even to that 1,250 mark, that has been outlined here in that question. My only thought of like why they wouldn't is if those first 3 games of the year, and then even against like the Northwesterns, and maybe even late in the season against Rutgers, if those guys are kind of get in, get out with 8, 9, 10, 11 carries, and then get guys like Corey Smith, Quentin Martin, Tyke Hayes, Cam Wallace in the game and get them some run and keep those guys. I've used this phrase before, but in bubble wrap as much as you can in the regular season, so that they are fresh for the Big Ten championship game, potentially for the college football playoff and a potential run through the CFP. So my guess is that, here's my guess. I'll answer the question. I think they each will get 1,000 yards based on how many games that they're going to be playing. And obviously they're 2 very, very good backs. One will get to 1,250 and one will not.
Interesting. Okay. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think you hit on basically every factor that I believed with this as well. I really think they're going to limit those guys' carries as much as they can in the regular season. It could go as far as 17 games, 16 or 17. And both guys went over 1,000 last year. I think that both will get over 1,000. I don't think either one will hit 1,250 just because of the number of carries that they will probably lose while trying to keep them healthy. My other prediction, though, I do believe that Penn State will do everything in their power. The coaching staff specifically will do everything in its power to make sure that those 2 guys end up as 1 and 2 on the all-time rushing list ahead of Evan Royster. They're just 1,000 and change away from him, both of them, not 1,250. So I don't think that they will get to 1,250. I don't think either of them will, but I think they'll both go over 1,000. I think they'll finish 1-2 in the rushing yards, all-time program leaders. It would be really awesome if they could somehow make it so that the 2 tied. Like if it comes down to it's just not going to happen because the game that they may break it in is going to be probably a playoff game. But it would somehow just be awesome if they tied.
Yeah, I've got more specifically because I realize I said one of the 2 will get to 1,250.
Yeah,
I mean that's kind of soft. I'll specify. I'll say Nick.
Okay.
I'll say Nick will get to 1,250.
Yeah,
because he got to over 1,000 last year, and that was him being limited with an injury midseason. And then also, I like the approach that Stan Drayton, the new running backs coach, has taken with both those guys. But more specifically, Stan was talking in the spring about Nick relying on his instincts in the second level and not being as maybe calculated with the angles that safeties could take.
Yeah.
And that can turn a 25-yard run or a 20-yard run into 70. And I think Nick is going to have a lot more breakaway touchdowns this year, a lot of more 40-plus, 50-plus touchdowns, by a few or 4 or 5, whatever more this year than he did last year.
Yeah. Michael Kilcoyne, just following up on that a little bit. He says, after the historic season Genty had, what's it going to take for an RB to win the Heisman? There are a lot of talented running backs. Yes, there are. Dude, I don't know. Because Genty was so good. Travis Hunter was good too. I think honestly was probably just a victim of circumstance more than anything. Because in a lot of years, Genty would have won the Heisman. I think it just takes there not being a better player, Like if there's a good enough quarterback, a quarterback's going to win it. Last year, it wasn't a quarterback. I think Genty would have won most years if Travis Hunter didn't exist. So I don't know. That's kind of a tough one to answer. But you got to probably have a season like Genty had again in order to do it.
Yeah. And just one quick thing to add on that. I think you would have to have like Texas is not as good as it like this year specifically. Let's put it this year.
Yeah.
If Jeremiah Love goes out and puts up numbers that are not quite Genty like, but are really, really good, and Notre Dame's 12-0, and Texas isn't all that. Like Arch is just fine. Drew is, bolstered by Nick and Katron, and that offense is more balanced. It's not just quarterback driven. And Garrett Nussmeier and LSU and Brian Kelly fall off. Like that's what it would take, I think. A running back at Notre Dame like Jeremiah Love and his standing and his caliber. And if it's one of those like, oh, it's Notre Dame. Like if they're 12-0, as opposed to Genty, who I think did get hurt a little bit. Obviously by the incredible year that Travis Hunter had, but also just him playing at Boise State, level of competition, visibility, all of that.
Yeah. Another question, Brady Bowers. Other than Wheatley, who do you expect to be the other starting safety? Interesting one, because there are a lot of names, and also well-timed because we just got a little bit of interview time with Anthony Poindexter, the safeties coach, this week at practice. And basically the answer I have for you is we don't know, because Dex said he doesn't even know. He said, look, the question I asked him was, how many do you realistically think you're going to play in a game? He said probably 4 or 5. And he said, he added that, and he said, we don't know who the other starter is, though, because we are still figuring that out. It's probably going to take the first 3 games of the year. We do anticipate playing 4 or 5 throughout the season, but the first guy to go out there alongside him, that's still to be determined. If I had to guess, if I have to make an educated guess, I'd say it's probably Dejon Lane, just because of, the experience he had last year. We've continued to hear good things about him, but don't forget about a guy like Colin Dinkins, who, is also potentially getting some of that nickel action, and King Mack, who's come back to this team and gotten some really good praise from coaches and teammates so far. He's his personality, as we've come to learn, is pretty infectious in the locker room. King Mack was a very welcomed addition back to the locker room. So I don't know. I bet it's Lane, but it could change.
I agree. I think I would go Dejon Lane in that regard too. But King Mack and his speed, just not only like the vibes of him coming back, like players loved him, and the coaches loved him, but also just the ability that he had. There was a reason why Alabama wanted him, to transfer to Tuscaloosa, and then obviously a reason why Penn State would take him back, because that hasn't happened before in the James Franklin era, is taking a player back who transferred out of the program. So I think there's a lot to like there. And I think whoever does start, next to Zaki, the fact that he's with Zaki Wheatley, a guy who has been around for a very long time, still remember him making plays at Auburn in 2022. He's been making plays for this defense for a very long time, and they'll benefit from playing next to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the model that's been followed ever since it was Brisker, then Tig Brown, then KJ Winston, then Jalen Reed. There's been a great string of safeties at Penn State. Zaki Wheatley's the next one up. And playing alongside as well, and AJ Harris and an Elliott Washington makes their job a little bit easier. So I do think that there are a number of names that could take that spot. Like, just because we don't know who it is, I want to preface that by saying, like, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Like, I think Dejon Lane, King Mack, Colin Dinkins, other name that I kind of forgot about was AJ Belgrave Shorter. There are good players in that room who have done good things in camp. I think they're just looking for consistency and haven't necessarily gotten it yet. Let's do one last one here. This has been a long podcast, but I was about to wrap us up, Johnny, but Mark Breer, I hope I said your name right, comes in with one under the buzzer. So this is our last question here. 2 talented tight ends returning, but don't really know about the wide receiving core. How well do you see the wide receivers doing this year? Okay, this is kind of the question, right? I mean, we've been talking about this a long time. Johnny, I'll let you go first.
I'll first say I think there's 3 talented tight ends returning.
I think that's true as well.
It's Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, and Andrew Rapplier, because it's easy to forget about him. Like, I don't blame any fan, for overlooking Rapp, but this guy was supposed to be a really big player for Penn State last year before picking up the injury that he did in the early season in September. And so working his way back, I think he'll have a role as well. So go ahead.
Let me interject really quickly. A brief Andrew Rapplier story was on my docket for this upcoming weekend to fill some holes, because we also got to talk to Ty Howell at practice the other night. Basically said he's fully healthy, looks like the guy we expected last year. And I just wanted to add, we saw, if you missed my practice notes story, that's out there. We saw some 3-on-3 stuff in the red zone between offense and defense. It was a great period to get some insight on, like, who these receivers are, who these defensive backs are. Andrew Rapplier, I think, ran the best route of anybody during that period. He just absolutely cooked a defender on a slant route inside, scored a touchdown. He was cutting off of his lower body just fine. I think that we don't want to overlook him in that room. So back to the receivers, but yes, I agree with you. 3 talented tight ends.
Yeah, back to the receivers. I mean, we're gonna find out over. I want to say over the first 3 weeks, but really that Oregon game, like how good these guys really are. But at the same time, there's a reason why they went out and got Traber Pena, Kyron Hudson, and Devontae Ross. From your practice reports, Max, and speaking to you, like it really seems like Kyron Hudson has come along very, very well and could very well be the number 1 target in terms of the go get me a first down guy.
Yeah.
From USC transferring in the winter. That's one other thing I wanted to add to with Hudson and Ross coming in the winter. That's massive in terms of knowing the playbook like the back of your hand and building a rapport with Drew Aller. Not saying that Traber Pena, hasn't done that already, because we know that those guys were throwing a lot, voluntary workouts in the summer at the Lash Building. And Traber Pena, like his production at Syracuse in a pass happy offense, all ACC player. I think each of them brings something different to the table. And it's one of those where if you just drop them in to an offense and just had an average offensive coordinator working with them and an average quarterback working with them, you would say like, okay, these guys have to elevate an offense. But I think if they really might be more, I don't know. I think they might just be enhanced by the Drew Aller being a 3rd-year starter, and obviously by Andy Kotelnicki knowing what the hell he's doing and putting all these guys in position to succeed.
Something I asked Danny O'Brien too 2 weeks ago. All of these guys that they brought in are 4th, 5th, 6th-year seniors. They've also got a 5th-year senior at tight end. Like, yes, Drew Aller's experience helps these transfers coming in, but those guys having played a boatload of football at other schools is a great thing for Drew Aller, and also the backup quarterback situation that is potentially resolved. I think it's Ethan Grunkemeyer, but not like officially resolved, Go read Bob Flounder's story on that. I'm sure we'll talk more about it next week as well. But yeah, veteran wide receivers, I really do expect good things from these guys. I don't necessarily think Penn State gets a 1,000-yard receiver this year. I've said that a couple times before, just because there are different mouths to feed. But between the 3 tight ends, between the 3 wide receivers, I genuinely think this passing attack will have more options this year and thus be much more wide open and much more successful. If you look at what James Franklin said on Tuesday, he was asked specifically about those transfer wide receivers. You can kind of go down the list with him. Kyron Hudson, he called him Steady Eddie. That's big time from James Franklin. He said it a lot over the past. I don't know. That's like his new thing over the past year, I guess. But when he calls somebody Steady Eddie, it's a really good thing. It means he's just been consistent. And Hudson's body is big time, Big Ten level. Certainly can be a 3rd down red zone target. Traber Pena, I've seen some people talking about it. I think I know Josh Pate was out at practice recently this week, and I saw some people on Twitter raving about what he said about Traber Pena. Hey guys, I've been saying it for 2 months. Come listen to me. The guy is a serious route runner. And James Franklin said, like, he got bigger and stronger this offseason. He's been better than we expected him to be. I think he has the chance to really break out in the Big Ten. Good player. And Devontae Ross, he looks good, looks quick. A guy who Franklin said, like, he can scare people in space, which if you have a big body receiver you can trust to make contested catches, if you have a route technician out of the slot, and then you have a guy who can beat you deep, that's the ideal setup between wide receivers. They got to do it on the field, of course, but everything we've seen so far really, really lends itself to them doing it, in my opinion.
And one thing to add, because I agree with everything you just said. In terms of the passing game options for Drew Aller, don't forget about Nick Singleton, who had 41 catches last year, because I think that's just another a reason why he came back. Obviously, a big reason why all these guys came back was to contend for a national championship and the way the season ended, et cetera, et cetera. But Nick and Katron both want to improve themselves for the NFL draft. They want to raise their NFL draft stock. Well, How can you do that? Well, by becoming a better receiver out of the backfield. And we saw Nick make those strides last year. If he's even able to get a little bit better in that area, and it might look like he might have fewer catches than he did last year, but he might be more explosive. He might be more explosive as a pass catcher. So just something to add there. I think Penn State's going to have plenty of options in the passing game as they try to like you mentioned before, Max, in a previous podcast, try to moneyball this in replacing Tyler Warren.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, that point on Singleton is right in line with something Broski Bear just said here. He mentioned Singleton's receptions and receiving TDs. So, we're all in agreement here. Broski Bear, I apologize. We're not going to be able to get to your question that you just came in. We're gonna cut this thing off. We've already gone an hour, but
what is it though, Max? What is it? Let's come on.
All right. Let's do. Why not? Outside Oregon and Ohio State, which games do you consider the toughest game? Okay, I actually just read it for the first time. Okay. We did actually already kind of talk about that, but so if you want to read the full, if you want the full answer, just go listen back to the start of this podcast. I'm guessing you joined in late. But for me, it's Oregon and Ohio State, like you said, and then Iowa, Indiana, and Nebraska. Johnny's got a story about it. You can read it on Penn Live. You can listen to the rest of the podcast. We've got those things covered. This was fun, Johnny. This was fun.
It was. Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't even know we were going for an hour.
No.
It's talking ball. Like I'm fine with it.
We're talking ball, man. But I think boil it down. We both see Penn State going 11-1, lost to Ohio State. Those are our official predictions. But we dove into the schedule, said which games we could see trip ups in. Talked about my trap games. All of our preseason preview content is running on Penn Live between yesterday, earlier this week through this weekend, next week. Trap games, toughest games, record predictions, newcomers to watch, underrated players, storylines, all that stuff you want. It's on Penn Live. Go read it. Keep listening to the Blue White Breakdown podcast. We are here every Monday and Thursday, live on Thursdays. We've got really good audiences the past few weeks. We appreciate you all tuning in. We appreciate you listening on the recording too. Subscribe to the pod. Subscribe to PennLive.com. Keep checking us out. And Penn State football season, 9 days away, folks. Time to get excited.